The University of Minnesota Spotlight Series is a collaborative partnership of the Institute for Advanced Study, the University Honors Program, and Northrop to present lectures, panel discussions, exhibits, and other events like this one throughout the academic year around timely topics of interest. The six-part 2022-23 series focuses on how data, their collection, analysis, and the research questions that rely on them connect to the deeply personal lived experiences of individual human beings and to the human condition at large. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement that continues to be a work in progress as the university works together with the 11 tribal nations that share geography with the state now known as Minnesota. Northrop, the Institute for Advanced Study, and the University Honors Program respectfully acknowledge that the land we're on today is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Dakota people. The University of Minnesota is founded as a land-grant institution, and we recognize that our founding came at a dire cost to the Dakota people. The Dakota were forced to cede their lands in return for goods and services, but the government did not uphold the terms of these treaties, leading to widespread devastation. We recognize this painful past, and we honor Dakota people's history on this land, their sovereignty, and their continued contributions to our region. Minnesota comes from the Dakota name for this region, Minnesota Makoche, the land where the waters reflect the skies. The Dakota and numerous other indigenous peoples whose cultural, spiritual, and economic practices are intrinsically woven to this landscape hold this land sacred. We recognize them as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it who had thriving and vibrant communities prior to disruption by settlers. Today, the state of Minnesota shares geography with 11 tribal nations. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm tribal sovereignty, and we hold the University of Minnesota accountable to recognize and counter the historical and contemporary injustices that continue to impact Indigenous people through mutually beneficial partnerships, research, policies, and practices that respect indigeneity. This year's Spotlight Series has featured the voices and the research of several Native and Indigenous women who have helped us to better understand the relationships between our data and human-intensive research and the land where we live, learn, and work. Today's research topic about body storming aims to include deeper participation from patients, caregivers, and clinicians, bringing humanity and caring into the process, as well as voices not typically heard in this type of research. I share my gratitude for our guests today and throughout the series as they help us understand our relations in deeper ways. Those of you who have joined us for previous Spotlight events will notice that our room is set up a little differently today. That's because this event is organized as a body storm, which is a research practice developed by our facilitators. There will be multiple opportunities for our audiences to participate, both in person and online, and breaks to pause and converse during the body storm. Our facilitators, our moderator, and I will be active in helping you participate in this process, which has very simple rules to allow you to engage quickly. We will also have a short period for formal reflection and Q&A at the end of the body storm. So next, I'll offer a few technical instructions for our audience members. We do have a captioner working with us today. We recommend that online attendees view captions by clicking the stream text link shared via the chat. We'll also be using Slido to facilitate audience participation today. You can submit questions and observations anytime during our program. Attendees can use their smartphones and either scan the QR code displayed on the screen or go to www.slido.com and enter the code Spotlight Series. There will be a link in the Zoom chat for the Slido as well. Please note that questions and observations can be submitted anonymously and do have a character limit. We encourage you to upvote previously submitted items as well. For those of you joining online, Slido is the way that you can participate in the body storm. We invite you to share your observations of what you see and hear, and I will share those observations in the room using my microphone. For those of you in the room, you're welcome to use Slido, or you can raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you. Now, without further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce today's facilitators. Carl Flink is Artistic Director of the dance company Black Label Movement in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the University of Minnesota's Director of Dance. He was a member of the Lamone Dance Company during much of the 1990s and performed Paul Taylor's historic minimalist solo epic for a retrospective concert on postmodern minimalism presented by Lincoln Center in New York. His commissions and invited presentations include the American Dance Festival, Bates Dance Festival, the Minnesota Orchestra, MADCO, University of Florida Performing Arts, Same Planet, Different World, and Urbanity Dance, as well as multiple TED Talks. He's a two-time McKnight Choreography Fellow and the 2020 University of Minnesota College of Liberal Arts Dean's Medalist. Carl holds a JD from Stanford Law School. David Odde, who will be joining us mid-event due to some airline difficulties, is the Bakken Professor for Engineering and Medicine at the University of Minnesota. Dr. Odde's group builds computer models of cellular and molecular self-assembly and force generation dissipation dynamics and tests the models experimentally using digital microscopic imaging of living cells ex vivo and in engineered microenvironments. His group seeks to bring an engineering approach that uses physics-based modeling and analysis to understand, predict, and control disease outcomes. As part of his modeling practice, Dr. Odde's lab group collaborates with Black Label Movement to develop human movement as an approach to simulating cellular and molecular processes underlying cancer progression. Riley Manning is a fifth-year PhD student in the Biomedical Engineering Department. Her research focuses on exploring migration and immune response differences between glioblastoma subtypes using in vivo and in vitro experimental methods, as well as agent-based computational modeling. Riley's Odde lab projects include cancer cell migration, mouse glioma models, and Brownian dynamics-based tumor simulations. Our moderator for today and for the Spotlight series is Michael Corey. Michael is the Geospatial Technical and Data Lead and Associate Director for Mapping Prejudice, which uses crowdsourcing to identify racially restrictive housing covenants on properties in Minnesota and beyond. Before transitioning to public history, he spent 20 years as a data journalist, including at the Star Tribune and the Center for Investigative Reporting. Michael is also currently a graduate student in the University of Minnesota's Heritage Studies and Public History program. And it is my pleasure today to also welcome the Black Label Movers who are joining us for the Bodystorm. With that, I think that we're ready to start bodystorming. So Michael, Riley, Carl, and Movers, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We're all here, and as you can see, if you've been to these, this is going to be a little bit more of a complicated setup than we've had, and so bear with us. Some of us have headsets, but we do have mics going around for questions as we see them. The other thing I want to say is that I'm always blown away by when we're doing these intros, the huge range of experience, and I'm just so honored to be here with people who are so accomplished and so creative, and this is going to be a lot of fun.
And hello, everyone. I'm Carl Flink. I am the Artistic Director of Black Label Movement, and you see Black Label Movement moving around through the space. We're beginning our practice of getting ready for bodystorming. I realize I'm already a little out of breath, so I may be panting during this event. But one of the things we wanted to bring you, both the audience here live and also online, is into the experience of what is bodystorming. And in order to play that out while the movers keep moving through the space, is we'd like to bring Michael and Riley Manning out. Riley is one of the members of David Odde, my longtime collaborator's lab. And Riley's going to talk a little bit about the importance of modeling, and then we're going to use that as a springboard to talk about why bodystorming and what is bodystorming. So Riley, do you mind talking a little bit about why modeling is a critical piece in your world? And I'm going to continue to move with the company while you talk about that and then join back in.
Yeah, so in our lab we use a technique that's called agent-based modeling. And so in that specific type of modeling, all of the cells behave individually, so they're given a set of rules at the beginning of the simulation, and then they each make a decision at each time point based on those rules that they're given. So what you'll see is pretty similar to what actually is happening in bodystorming. So we can use results from actual experiments to set those rules, and then when we plug those into the simulation, we can make predictions on how future experiments will go. And it's a lot faster and less expensive than performing the actual experiments themselves.
And so when you say modeling, when you say simulation, essentially you're writing code, right? You're doing computer programming.
Yes, yeah, we write them in MATLAB.
Cool, yeah. So this is very exciting for me. And let's see, what I was gonna save this for later, but I'll ask now. Like, so you're a brilliant young cancer researcher coming into this lab. And when did you first find out you're gonna be doing something like that's called bodystorming?
Yeah, so I think it was my first year that I was a PhD student in Dr. Odde's lab, and I heard about it, and I'd kind of seen pictures of it and videos of it, and so I was excited to try it for the first time, like actually in person. It's like a whole different thing when you're actually seeing it, you know, happen and seeing everybody acting out all of the rules that you give them.
Awesome. Well, and David Odde has made it to the to the building. David has entered the building.
I'm in the house. Hello. I'm in the house here. Test.
There we go.
Yeah. Great to be here. My apologies. But I'm glad to see everything's in motion. And Riley's able to talk about her modeling a little bit, which is really amazing.
So one of the things that happened when David and I actually were brought together in the early years of the Institute for Advanced Studies here at the University of Minnesota, the initial director of IAS, Ann Waltner, thought that we would be a good conversation, at least, to start talking about collision and kind of the dynamics that are happening in David's research. But very quickly, we learned that as David was talking about his research, it said, well, you're talking a lot about movement. You're talking a lot about things happening in space inside of a cell. It's not that much different from me being in a studio with a group of dancers moving through space. What if we started trying to model your science, but instead of using computer programs, using other scientific methods or technologies, what if we introduced a very new technology, or also a very old technology, into the space, which is bodies, human bodies moving in the space using choreographic principles to describe what is happening inside of the cell in this specific instance. And we started just playing with that model. And kind of what was your initial reaction to that, David?
Oh, it was really liberating because I think of things very physically, and so we do a lot of mathematical modeling and a lot of thinking, but to actually kind of act out or embody our models, it was a really liberating experience, and I just latched onto it right away. It felt very comfortable to me. I grew up playing sports and things like that, so I kind of liked the movement, the contact, and yeah, it helped me a lot right away.
And one of the things that we also found is that when I watch David, whenever he talks about his research, he moves an immense amount, and he gives me a lot of information. And so I just said, well, here's a person I think really is open to this idea. And one of the things that we definitely discovered is not all scientists were open to this idea. So we would go sometimes to labs, and David would introduce us to new people, and they say, I don't get that, and they would walk away. And that was okay, right? What we realized is we wanted this to be a practice that invited people who were interested into the room. Why with bodystorming did it seem like there was value? And one of the things that we found is that we had this insider-outsider benefit, which is David could stand outside of a model and look at it, but David could also suddenly be inside of a model and be pulling and moving with the movers and be actually inside of a model of a research that he had done only using microscopes and computer programs, never having actually seen it with his living eye. You could be there. Other benefit is we had the collective mind. Well, you see all the movers moving and through the space and not hearing their voices. In a bodystorm, as you'll see, all of them are people who can actually give us input. They are experiencing and getting and seeing data, observing data that they can read back to the scientist. And interestingly enough, we stopped thinking that it had to be scientific data. We also talked about how are you feeling? What's sparking in your mind? What are the imaginative ideas that are coming out of you. And we just found all of that dialogue was useful as a way of building a better model, right? And then we've also had the idea that it was just fun, right? There's just some joy in being in a room, moving with other people, dancing with other people, and not necessarily just being in a cubicle with a computer, doing all of those, doing the research in a very isolated way. And so we saw that there's an opportunity to actually bring community into the research process. How have you, and it's been an arc, right? We've been doing this for 12 years. You didn't initially think of it as something that was something you wanted to share broadly with all your peers in the scientific community, but it's really been you've really changed in terms of this last decade.
Yeah, I think when we first started, we wanted to put on a performance, for an audience and demonstrate some scientific principle or finding that we had. But when I invited other scientists into the space to do that, they had their own ideas about that very same thing that I was trying to choreograph through your company, and suddenly realized that one scientist like Riley might have a different picture in her mind of how a tumor grows or a cell divides than I do. Oh, we thought we understood that. We actually have identified a difference of perspective on it, and now we can embody both scenarios or multiple scenarios. So I realized it wasn't just for demonstration to an audience, something we've never done actually, do like a performance of something to demonstrate a principle. It's just been an active process, a part of our research practice.
So Carl, as we're moving right,
Yeah.
I was thinking like, oh, I should start moving. I don't have anything to say right now, but I actually don't know the rules
Right.
for this part. So do you want to talk us through what's happening right now?
Well, one of the things that's been a very exciting discovery for us with Bodystorming is the idea of leaning into improvisation. So rather than thinking about set choreography, as Michael is asking, what are the rules that are kind of defining what is happening in the room? Actually, right now, the rules have been really simple. We said when Kristen introduces Black Label Movement, walk into the room. If you want to pull away from each other, you can. If you want to swing each other, you can. And interestingly enough, that's evolved into this, right? Suddenly we've seen these chains of action happening. And so one of the beautiful things about working with bodies who are just curious is they just start evolving the rules. The rules were very simple. They've become increasingly complicated. But one of the things that is challenging if you're not a person used to this kind of thing, having clarity around those rules is really important. But we also want to talk about how do we get prepared for this. And so there's two things I want to offer. If any of you at any point want to come and join us here in the live audience, you are welcome to do so. We will be really clear about what the rules are so that you can join in, so don't hesitate. The only thing we ask is that you be in socks or bare feet. But we also wanted to bring you through two exercises that we have to warm up for Bodystorming. And the first of those is called Layers of Touch. And so I'm going to ask everybody in the room to find a partner and really spread through the space so we can see. So this work, Layers of Touch, actually comes from another collaboration that I have with a woman named Joanna Mendel-Shaw, who runs a company called the Equus Projects in New York City. It's a company that moves with horses. They do not ride the horses. They move with horses in what's called at liberty, which means on the ground. And they have a process called kind of the phases of touch with the horse. There's a kind of a soft touch, a harder touch, and a very hard touch, and then a very aggressive touch. And so we've translated that into the idea of layers of touch, which are follicle, skin, sinew, and then skeletal touch. And what I want to do is invite you all, if you're with a partner, you can do that. But if you're just with yourself, I'm going to lead you through this process of finding out what those touches mean so you can understand them a little more deeply. For those in the online audience, this is something you can absolutely do with yourself. I'm going to demonstrate it with myself, but everybody can spread out here. And we're only going to use hands. This would be a practice that we could actually do for 2 or 3 hours and use the entire body, but we're going to use hands here. So one person is going to be the receiver. I'm going to be both receiver and giver if I'm going by myself. And the other person, one person is the giver, one person is the receiver. Have you decided who that is?
What do you think?
Okay. I guess maybe I'll go with David here. So David is going to be the receiver and I'm going to be the giver. David's going to put out his hand. The first touch that we're going to explore is actually a non-touch. It's the touch right before you come in contact with the skin. So what we call the follicle touch. If you were going across someone's forearm, you might be actually coming in contact with their hair. And so here, you're just going to move very gently. You might even move to a place where you're using your face or another part of your body, but you're just trying to stay 1 millimeter away from that contact. It's the contact right before you would actually touch someone. And we're going to go fairly quickly through this, so I'm going to quickly say we're going to reverse roles. So now David comes in contact with my follicle space. And I can even respond a little bit with giving some motion. But it's really trying to find what would it be to be 1 millimeter away from someone's skin. Not a centimeter, but 1 millimeter. And then we'll reverse those roles and we'll go to skin touch, where I'm now going to lay my hand on David's hand. But rather than grabbing hold of his hand, like a water bug on the surface of a pond or a stream, I'm just on the surface of the skin, not trying to get past. It's a very gentle touch. Sensing what is that initial touch right after you've been close to someone's body for follicle. And we'll switch roles. The reason why we do this work is because bodystorming is a highly physical activity. It actually, at times, means that people are going to run into each other at speed. We're going to talk about impact work later. And so, actually, having a thought and being prepared to be in touch with other human beings is important. It's a caring process. And now we'll evolve to sinew, where I'm now going to try to feel the musculature beneath the skin. So it's a deeper touch. It'll look more like maybe a firm handshake. That's the kind of energy. If you want to use your face, you just kind of smush your cheek into their hand. It's really deep and artistic when you do that. And then we switch roles. So now the person who's receiving the touch should really feel as if the person who is contacting them is taking control. Not necessarily control in a negative way, just like, I'm taking a hold of your hand. You know I'm here. It's not the follicle touch and the skin touch has kind of we're still kind of in our own space, but now I really know that David's touching me. And I actually have to respond or resist. In this case, I'm just going to be kind of responsive. I'm going to talk while David continues to give me this lovely massage about skeletal touch. Skeletal touch is a super intense touch. It's a touch that we actually witness a lot in various activities. If you are a fan of contact sports, you witness skeletal touch all the time when a linebacker drives a quarterback into the ground. They're not gently touching them, they're actually taught to hit through the body. So they're actually taking hold of the skeleton and driving through. So now when I switch, now I'm really taking David's skeleton. And David very much knows that I am present. The hand is a really good place for that because the bones are really on the surface. A place I'd like to think about, like you're kind of like, whoa, that sounds really aggressive and potentially violent and all those things. Yes, because I talked about a quarterback being hit. But it also could be a kitten who's saying to their mother, when the mother picks them up by their neck, oh, life is so good, my mother's biting my neck. And I feel so secure and taken care of and trusted. So one of the things that's interesting about skeletal touch is that if it's done in a trusting environment, it can be one of the most caring touches imaginable. Yeah. And switch. And it's really important that we get that balance of back and forth touch so that we're building this duet with each other. And David is being really kind because he hasn't actually taken hold of my skeleton yet. He's staying in sinew touch. Skeletal touch is a hard one to be disciplined about, right? Because it's like, what does that mean? Like, I got to take hold of your skeleton? That feels pretty aggressive, right? But if you think about the interior of the cell that David and his researchers posit, that it's a fairly volatile space where things are hitting each other at 600 kilometers an hour. How do we make a model where we're hitting at 600 miles an hour without knowing about skeletal touch? I'm wondering, Michael, or Kristen, if there's any questions that are coming around that, or if there's any questions in the room that anyone would have about this touch. Just to throw out at that moment.
Carl,
Yeah.
I haven't seen any questions yet about the touch, but there was a question earlier around just kind of some of the movements and the meaning of the movements that the dancers were doing before, and I know that they were based a little bit on the rules that you gave, but can you talk a little bit about how the movement that people are seeing kind of reflects your process?
So the process that we've seen so far, it's a great question, is what does this all mean? So far, nothing has meant anything. And I don't say that facetiously. It is kind of a humorous moment, but we didn't actually have when Tessa contacts Sarah, that means this. However, that doesn't mean an audience member doesn't have a really specific resonance with what they're seeing. So right now we're really in this preparation place, but if you're seeing something that is resonating with you, that's something to write into the Slido charts, because that's actually information for me. When they were doing this, I felt this way. So we weren't trying to dictate anything other than getting warmed up. So I'm going to continue with that and maybe start going into our final warm-up, which is our exploration of Brownian motion. And I'm going to let David share with us what Brownian motion is.
And just as we're doing that, I want to put in a plug here. As I told our fellow panelists in IAS when we were starting this, there are very few things that are further outside my comfort zone than doing something that resembles dancing on stage. And so the exercises that we're going to do later, I want to emphasize that if you're along with me on that ride, and this is all maybe a bit much, I want to encourage you to if you're open to it, take a chance and come down. There's nothing complicated about what you're going to do, and it's really fun, and it's a really enjoyable experience. So thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I have
Great point.
I have no dance background either. I mean, I don't mind dancing a little bit at home, but yeah, so it's kind of a new thing for me too. So Brownian motion, you asked about, Carl, down at the microscopic level, you get molecules in our body like water or proteins, and they're moving. They're not static, and they're moving, as Carl said, like hundreds of miles per hour. So there's really fast motion. Is anybody moving 100 miles an hour yet, or 600? No, not quite. All right. Let's start low. And the molecules are close together. They're like they are, like you see everybody's now like getting within just a foot or two of each other. And they start to move randomly. They can't really see very far, so to speak. They can see maybe a foot away and kind of feeling by force, just like we just did the touch at different levels. They can touch or feel, but only over kind of a short range. So they're kind of covering their eyes so they can't see where they're going. And then they're taking random steps forward, back, maybe making a turn with that step. And that's all contained within the cell. So you see the group holding hands here. You can think of that as the membrane of the cell that contains all those molecules. And you can see how they're getting pushed around a little bit too when there are collisions with the molecules inside the cell. They hit the boundary of the cell and they start to exert force on them. And they might get pushed back for a while, but then they can rebound because of the tension between the links between each member of the membrane. So that's, I guess, Brownian motion in a nutshell. Brown was the person who observed that first in the microscope and reported it. But you're actually seeing it live and in person now.
So we're going to so we just wanted to demonstrate initially kind of what this might look like, but now we want to take you into the rules of it. So what we've created outside is, for lack of a better way of putting it, a membrane, something to create a container. That membrane we can actually work with by constricting the space. We can increase the amount of collisions that happen, which might be representative of turning up the heat. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have Roberto and Tessa go into the middle. This gesture is not only there to kind of cover the eyes, it's also there protectively because we are in a place where we might be bouncing off each other. And so this is a way to cover the space because they're actually going to close their eyes the next time they do this. And we're going to have specific rules. So when you hear a beep, you're going to step forward. You're going to make a decision in that moment to step forward and turn right, or step back and turn right or left. So those are the only rules that you all have. The one thing you have to try to avoid is doing anything other than responding to the beep and moving consciously. You're just trying to respond. And I'm inviting you to close your eyes. The other piece we're going to do is we're going to talk about, rather than stepping, you're going to slide your feet so we don't have to worry about stomping on each other's feet. Yeah? And that's it. So now we'll see, and we'll ask you to also have observations about what you're noticing in terms of once the eyes are closed and once we've created a smaller space. So I'm going to have Emily and Sarah actually hold hands, and we'll make this even smaller.
And maybe if anyone is now feeling it, like I want to be a molecule, I want to be a membrane.
This is the moment.
This is your chance. I've been thinking about it my whole life.
Experience Brownian motion.
What are these protein things they talk about?
We're going to do it 3 times. So if you feel like after you've seen it and you've seen that no one has that, everyone's walked away alive, you would be welcome to come and join us.
And for people out in the Zoom space too, I think they can get up. You can move. Carl just gave you the rules. You're in some space. You take it from there.
So one more time with the rules. On the beep, you step forward or back, turn right if you go forward, or make a decision turning left or right when you go back. You're not avoiding collisions. You're also not seeking out collisions. You're not avoiding the membrane, but you're also not seeking out the membrane. And the one thing we're going to do is we're all going to try to do this with eyes closed. And yes, we have a safety principle here, which we have a safety word, which we call, and our word is condor. Why condor? Because it just doesn't come up in normal conversation that often. And so if anyone says condor, we just stop. We immediately find out how they're doing and take care of them. There's no judgment, no interruption. Everybody in this space is more important than the model. And so if someone says condor, we stop, see how they're doing. And they may just need it. I just need to stop. And then we can start again. So, if anyone says condor, we'll all stop and take care of each other. And the last rule is once we close our eyes, I'm going to say spin. And the people in the membrane are going to be the ones who say beep and spin.
Beep. 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 Beep.
Beep,
Beep. Beep.
beep,
Beep.
beep,
Beep.
beep,
Beep. Beep.
beep,
Beep.
beep,
Beep. 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 Beep.
beep,
Beep.
beep,
Beep.
And hold.
Now, I'm not going to say right away, I imagine people have questions. So I'll start with, why are we beeping and why are we turning right?
Why are we turning right?
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is create a structure where the rules are simple enough that you don't have to overthink. As soon as you hear the cue of beep, you just have to say step forward and turn, or step back and turn. And you're trying to not overthink that. You're not saying, oh, I went forward twice, so I now should go backwards twice. You're trying to stay in that moment, go back and forward, whatever, first choice, best choice.
And are you generating a random movement, or is there something about the structure of the movement that you're trying to replicate from a model?
In this, we're just trying to explore Brownian motion.
Yeah, in Brownian motion, we think that essentially means random motion.
Okay.
So there's no bias to go forward, back, left, right, and there's also no relationship between what I'm going to do now and what I've done in the past. I absolutely forget everything that just happened. So that's kind of our motto for it. We're not sure that's how it actually happens, but it seems like it. As far as we know, there's no beeping happening in the cell. Sidebar, my colleague Carrie Bloom at the University of North Carolina actually put a microphone in to a culture of yeast and then recorded the sounds. And it was like different, like we put some poisons in it, started like, sounded like it was screaming or something like that. But at any rate.
But so is the beep just signaling a random time point then?
It's
Or-
kind of setting the pace, right, of how
Okay.
fast we're moving.
Okay.
If when they're saying it fast, you notice like as if the temperature went up.
Gotcha.
That's exactly what temperature is. It's basically the speed at which the molecules are moving. That's the definition of temperature. Actually, speed squared, but you know, yeah.
Kristen, do you have something from the audience?
Yeah, there are some observations in the Slido. One was in the original warm-up, somebody observed that it just looks like slow motion chaos. And then we also had a question, does the cell membrane also close its eyes?
The cell membrane doesn't close its eyes. Actually, we've never done that before. Wow, why have we never done that before? So thank you to that observer or for that question, because I think we're going to do that this next time. So this is classic body storming. Something is offered from an observer. We might talk about it for a brief while, but one of the things we're really clear about is we never talk for more than 5 minutes before we start the body storm again. Because sometimes the researchers get so busy wanting to make sure everybody understands everything that 2 hours later, we haven't moved. And so I think that's a great suggestion. We'll try that. And I think we'll add in you all are rotating while your eyes are closed and you're beeping. 3 new additions. That's probably actually enough. A question I throw out to all audience members is, what did you observe? Did you think that people were moving randomly? Did you feel like, no, someone was really making decisions? Any observations on that front? Yes.
Yeah, so I was looking at different molecules, and some it seemed, okay, if they run into something, then the next time they'll back off, and others just persisted, and I wasn't sure if that had to do with the personality of the molecule or not.
And that's almost always me.
Yes, it was.
Because they always comment on that. I think I relish that. No, maybe it's because I've been in this longer than everybody. There's a human tendency to, when you come in contact with the membrane, to say, oh, I should pull away because there's a boundary. And literally the rule is first choice, best choice. So if I encounter the membrane and I make my choice to go forward, it's literally every decision is the same. So it should be a 50-50 chance. So it's possible that I might go straight into the membrane 5 times. Simply because, so it's actually not, I will say I love physical contact and I love partnering. So maybe there's in the back of my head something about that, but it's also trying to adhere to the rule of first choice, best choice. So I'm never going to avoid contact simply because contact's happening. Yeah. David, there's a...
Okay.
Thank you. This is fascinating. So I'm a cancer survivor, so I'm watching in 2 lenses, like art and science, right?
Yeah.
And so when you just changed the rules and said, oh, let's try it with the membrane closing their eyes, I keep wanting to ask myself, are we moving into the art form right now, or are you observing the science? Is that a scientific element that you've just added? So my brain is like going
Yeah.
back and forth, and is that the goal?
I think the answer is yes. So one of the things that we're really trying to talk about with body storming is the reciprocal relationship of research between the artists and the scientists. That all of these artists aren't simply in service to the scientists who are in the space, but that out of this we may pull ideas that then feed back into the art. And we're going to try those things right now, is I'm just trying to show the iterative process, the idea that when we get into the body storm that we're going to do with Riley's, which we should get to shortly, is we'll posit the initial model, and then we'll say, well, what did you see? and other people will talk about it. And there might be sometimes where someone says, well, I just had fun doing this. And we'll say, well, let's try it. It's just a mutation, right?
Yeah, and also, I find the suggestion of eyes closed, which we've never done,
Yeah.
great, because what they're doing is, I would like, in my picture of what the membrane should do scientifically, is not anticipate that they're gonna get hit, not really react to it, other than like a rubber band would react. And again, just like the molecules had their eyes closed, maybe it would be good if the membrane had their eyes closed so they weren't imposing any kind of intentionality behind it. So it'd be interesting to see if the experience is any different for us, or if the observation of it is any different for you. And you might see things that we can't see, and we might experience things that you're not experiencing.
And I realize one reason why we may not have done this before is because the membrane don't get to do the safety gesture. So I'm trying to think what that would mean, because if we turn
5 minutes.
if we yes, right, okay, well, that's right. We've been talking too long. So I think that yeah, but then that's in the weird. We're going to do it. But what I would say is, if you are experiencing at any moment a sense of proximity that you want to open your eyes, do so. Okay, but then we're.
What if the membrane turned its back?
The only worry for that is that the elbow joints don't bend that way, and so I'm a little worried about just the safety of the physicality.
Do they lock arms like this?
Let's do that. All right, let's lock arms.
So we're gonna lock arms and go
Locking,
backwards?
you guys are locking arms.
Okay.
Wow, this is taking on a very different vibe right now. All right, so things to note: it made the membrane considerably smaller. We have someone joining us. All right, woo, Susanna.
Okay, so now we're not gonna close our eyes though as the membrane, right? Is that?
No, you are.
We still are,
Yeah,
okay,
you still
okay.
are. Because you have peripheral vision. Hi, Susanna. All right, you got this beautiful gesture. Great. You are rotating and you all are dinging and your eyes are closed. Okay? Condor very much in play here. Okay? All right. And spin.
Beep. 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 Beep.
And hold. Stay where you are. Cool. Any observations that you would like to offer there? Yes. That we're more circular in terms of the bodies and okay, the observation was we're more circular this time. Circular in terms of the membrane or in terms of the bodies inside the space?
In terms of the membrane, the last time the membrane was very, it became very like lots of different shapes, and this time it actually maintained the circular shape much more consistently. And it became oval at one point, but part of it might be the locking of the elbows, but something about the lack of expectation
Right.
of the impact meant that people were more consistent in their spot. They didn't shift away as much.
Well, I heard someone here say a stronger membrane, like as a question, and I think that's interesting because my experience was actually it was a little more tenuous. Like when we have the locked arms, then you don't have the like you could really hold hands tight before. So it's interesting that it's like more circular, but maybe less, maybe a little more tenuous in terms of bond.
Yeah, and I just wondered if that's what happens with cells, if cells are actually maintain their circular shape much more consistently. And so then in that sense, this actually mimics that more so, or if cells are constantly moving in terms of shape.
I'm going to ask another scientist in my group. This is Roberto Alonso Mattia, and he studies these things. So what do you think? Is that something that would play a role? Like the way we change the membrane, does that correspond to anything in the models that you're developing?
I will say that the shape changes have to do more with the cortex, which is like a filament structure underneath of the cell membrane, and that's what creates all those forces that will change the morphology of the cells. I should add that also the membrane tension also, if it's stiffer, then it will resist more those changes in shape. So I'm not sure how to relate that to what you saw. But I would expect that if it was more circular, then the connections between the components of the membrane were like kind of more rigid.
Yeah, cells can regulate that.
I have 2 questions in the Slido too.
Yeah, and I think maybe what we'll do after those 2 questions is we'll move to doing this body storm with Riley. Yeah.
So number 1, what happens if the cell membrane breaks? And then do you want to go one at a time, or should I just ask them both?
If the cell membrane breaks, this is what we're aiming for with cancer, actually. We want the T cells to go in and rupture that membrane so that their guts basically spill out, and that's the end of the cancer cell. So that could be a very good thing in that situation. It also happens when we're fighting off an infection, things like that. So it's actually a pretty normal part and can happen, and it's something that our immune system tries to make happen.
And one of the things that why we try to avoid doing too much learning of the specific science for the people who are involved is we're really trying to just stay in the moment. What are the physical rules? What is happening? Let the scientists then have discussion about what's happening and then we can recalibrate the rules differently, right? This structure definitely created more solidity, strength to the membrane versus the handhold. All of those things, are those things we want to keep in the model, or do we want to let them go? And something I forgot to talk about earlier is the fact that we can change the model in 5 or 6 minutes. That's completely different than if you're trying to program these models, which can take weeks or months to make that happen. A lot more computational power with that model, but we can go very quickly through this, which can give us like really strong indications of maybe some directions we'd want to go with the science.
Yeah. Was there a second question?
Yeah.
There is. Does the conversation and do the rules of movement imply that cancer cells don't have intention?
We've had that question many times. Are there mean cancer cells? Or do they have emotions and things and intentions?
They appear to have intentions. It's hard, but we're just like, it's like, as scientists, those of you who are out here or in the Zoom space, you're observing what's happening. You don't know whether we have an intention or not. You could guess. It may look as if it does, but actually we may have intentionally encoded not to have intention. And whether we achieve that or not is up to you to decide. I don't know.
Any other questions out in our live audience here before we go on? I want to do something really quick before we go into the body storm. Chang, can you come with me? So a lot of what you're seeing today is kind of entry-level physicality. And what we as Black Label Movement do is we train to get to high-level impact. And so we have a structure called our impact technique, which is about actually hitting each other. And one of the things why I'm bringing this up in terms of some of those questions is we're just going to share a physical experience. I have given no emotional quality to it, but I promise you it will have an emotional quality. Right? So I'm going to let you hit me first. Okay? Another principle that we have in this impact technique is both people get to mutually hit each other. So, all right, you ready? Great. Ready? You can go a little harder, maybe go on my chest this time. A lot of stuff in that, right? A lot of emotions might come up when you see that work. But honestly, I'll let Chang talk for himself. It kind of like, oh yeah, let's go. It's just like it's very energizing. Chang, do you have any reaction to that? You got a mic right there.
Yes, in a way, it's kind of like a wake-up call, and it rejuvenates you in a weird, odd way. You're like, okay, yes, I am ready, or it woke me up, or kind of like when you're driving and you're kind of just cruising, and then something happens in the middle of the road, and you freak out, and now you're awake, and it's almost like that, like, oh, I'm active now.
And why we need to do that is because inside of a cell, things are hitting each other at 600 kilometers an hour. And we tried to figure out how, we wanted to figure out a way to give to these scientists that level of athleticism in this modeling, which we won't be doing any more today, but we wanted to show you a little bit of where we go. But I'd like Riley to come out with Michael and David, I think, as well. And will you talk a little bit about what we're going to try to model right now?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're working on adding to our computational simulations is the cytotoxic T cells in the tumor. So simulating like the natural immune response to the tumor, and how that works in the simulation right now is once there's a certain number of cancer cells in the simulation, then the T cells start to come in and they deliver these sublethal hits. So it takes more than one hit from a T cell to kill a cancer cell.
So basic questions for people to know, what's a T cell? What does a T cell do?
What type of T cell? There's like the cytotoxic.
Well, so my impression of what T cell is it is a cell that comes in and tries to kill something. Does it kill just cancer? Are they specialized? What is it?
Yeah, so in this case, they're like when the T cells are coming into the tumor, they're recognizing something on the surface of the cancer cell, and then they'll bind to that, and then once they have that connection, they can deliver those sublethal hits.
And they're saying, this shouldn't be here. Something has alerted me that this shouldn't be here, and I'm going to get rid of it.
Yes.
Right.
So we should wade into setting up this idea.
Yeah, and I'll just say too, it's a hard problem for the T cells to solve because they're killing our own cells, and if we kill our own cells too much, we have an autoimmune disease. So the immune system has to kind of make this call all the time. So
Riley, can you talk to me about what you think this environment looks like, and then we'll start generating what that environment might be in a model.
So how we should
How should
model
we,
it?
what are the motions, what are the
yeah.
motions that you're seeing, and then I'll try to come up with some vocabulary, physicality for that.
Yeah, so we'll have the cells, like kind of how we started, but like moving around using Brownian motion, and then they will also grow, and then once they reach a certain volume, they'll divide.
Okay.
So that's kind of what the cancer cells are doing to start off.
Okay, what is the environment? Do we have a membrane around the, should we have a
like
membrane?
a confined
Okay, so
space,
confined space. So can you all get inside of this, let's say inside of the reach of the screen right here. So all of these bodies are inside of that space.
Well, do you want to be adding people from the outside?
Don't know yet. Yeah, that's a great question, Rachel. So Rachel asked, do we want to be adding people in from the outside? But we're still building the model, yeah. So I've got everybody kind of in here. So we've got a bunch of particles. We haven't defined whether they're T cells or whatnot yet. So what else is going on?
Yeah, so then after that's kind of been going on for a little bit, like I mentioned earlier, once there's a certain number of cancer cells, then the T cells will start to come in.
Great. So we need to have, so let's have half of you, let's say there's an arc that goes from that end of the screen to where I am. So let's have half of you go outside of that arc.
I'm going to stay inside this time.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah. All right. Great. Maybe Tessa, you are outside as well. Great. Okay. So now these folks are in the middle.
Okay.
What's happening with them? And what are these people? Are these the T cells coming in?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to say Jake and me and Rachel. We're going to be the membranes that are kind of keeping people inside of this container. Everybody else who I didn't name, you are now T cells. So what are they looking to do, and what are they looking for in terms of encountering these cells? Is this the expanding cell situation or particle?
Yeah, so if we're trying, I guess, because we don't want to get too many rules or else it gets kind of complicated. So I guess, are we going to try to focus on the actual T cell killing, I think would be.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so maybe for now we just have the cancer cells moving around. We don't necessarily have to have them dividing, I think, at this point.
Okay.
To kind of keep it simple. And
Right.
then we can just have, I guess, the T cells come in at a time point, and then...
And are these cells with their eyes closed, so they're just milling in this space?
Yeah. Just moving around randomly.
And when the T cell comes on, you talked about multiple hits versus a single hit.
Yeah, so the T cells should probably somehow have their eyes closed too, if we can keep them into the confined space. And then if they bump into a cancer cell, then they'll deliver those sublethal hits.
And those sublethal hits are kind of like a tap.
Yeah.
Okay, so cool. I think we might have something we can run. These are the cancer cells, and they're going to be actually just in the Brownian motion action. You all will be on the outside. Jake, Rachel, and I will be making sure once you close your eyes, because you're going to be randomly moving too. You're not just going to be, go straight into them. So you're going to be, once you start moving, we're going to keep you on. We're going to work to keep you on the inside of that space. So Chang is here. If it doesn't matter how the T cell encounters them, should they just start tapping?
Yeah, I think that's fine to start.
Okay, great. So how many taps before the cancer
Just
cell
3.
goes? Okay, so the thing to think about is, and let's say the tapping isn't like ba 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 really quick, but it's just like boom, boom, boom. But that means Chang might be moving away during that time. So then I might miss. Do those taps sustain?
Yeah, so like they would form a connection, the T cell and the cancer cell, and they would move together for, yeah.
I see. So
So the cancer cell can't escape, really.
So we have to have a bonding moment. So should it be that if my hands get here, I can now start pulsing?
That'd be
Great.
good.
All right. So the connection is if I go here, I don't start pulsing. It's only if I feel this connection, I pulse. What we're going to do, add into this, is if you start feeling that pulse in the right position, you make some type of noise. Ah, bah, bah. All right. Cool. Yeah.
How do T cells not bump into other T cells?
They could.
T cells bump into other T cells?
They could bump into each other, but
But they won't go.
Because you won't have this position. This, if you feel this, that means you know you've connected and you have the ba ba ba.
That's
The
a cancer cell.
the T cell.
Yeah.
If the T cell connects to a cancer cell and goes squeeze, 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 and Chang would have made noise. Yeah, yeah. That's
And then
more.
you
That's probably more of the art piece than the reality piece.
right.
But
We'll start with that.
all right.
Yeah.
So
And
I
then-
think that's enough.
Yes.
Right.
And then do they
that's plenty.
exit?
And then once
you die as a cancer cell?
you become inert. And then their hands go to their side.
Okay, that's
You
fine.
open your eyes and you just walk through the space. Once you've been killed.
How do the T cells know when to go?
You're going to go in. You're going to just decide to go in when you want to. Close your eyes and go. Okay.
And, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So
No, it's good.
Make the connection, and then we have to go like boom.
You're just gonna. There's no hitting in this one anymore. Yeah. If I make this connection, I'm just gonna squeeze Chang's hands. It's much safer that way. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, Rachel. Yeah.
If the T cells are like this and the cancer cells are like this and everybody has their eyes closed, how does
The T cells are not like this.
Thank you.
Yeah. The T cells have their hands out like this and are creepily looking for people to connect to. Yeah. Insert the Last of Us analogy right there. All right. All right, here we go. So, Rachel, Jake, and I are these massive membrane. Everybody else, you all are going to spin and then just start moving randomly. Just kind of walk in that stepping thing. You don't need to hear a beep. You're just going. You all close your eyes and go into the space, and we see what happens. And we cure cancer. All right?
Spin.
Oh, you just stay in. You just stay in as an inert. Yeah, yeah. I don't have an answer to that. Yeah. And hold. Beautiful. All right. Who is a cancer cell that was not destroyed by a T cell? So we had 2 of those there. So I'm going to say, without talking much, there were the question, if the T cell does destroy a cancer cell, does it continue or is it now inert as well? Riley.
Oh, you said if a T cell kills
Yeah.
a cancer cell?
Yeah.
So at some point the T cells do become exhausted. So in our simulations, it's about after 3 or 4 kills. So
Okay. So you can continue to, so that's good because I think most of our T cells actually stopped. So now you can continue to go on. Let's see if that results in a different situation and maybe no survival.
So T cells have fingers out and cancer cells have fingers in.
You got it.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Any other questions before we try it again?
Does anyone else want to join?
Yeah. Any questions? Like join the zombie apocalypse. Okay. All right, here we go. All right. All right, and spin in the middle.
Already done.
And stop. All right, great. So again, what cancer cells survived that experience? All right, so 2. So we didn't necessarily see a change. So I'd love to see if there's anybody online or in here who would like to share some observations you had of that. Like, again, none of it needs to be right. It's just what are you seeing? Because that might inform how we adjust the model. Also in conversation with Riley in this case. Yeah, you know.
I know at least one of them. Did you survive both times? Yeah, so it was the exact same too. Isn't that interesting?
Well, I think Caitlin survived
Oh, you
last
survived
time,
last one?
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there might be something uniquely special about them. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So the observation from the live audience was that some of the survivors were the same people. And is that important information? We don't know, right? But it could be. And that's why we want, rather than trying to be right or make this work, we really just want to have those kind of observations to find out if David, Riley, or Roberto would say, no, that's not how it happens at all. Let's ignore that. Or, wait, that might be real. Maybe that goes to the intention question. Maybe Eliana and Roberto were really committed to the idea that I'm never going to be caught, right? And so we might need to coach, if it's important, and coach them to move away from that intention of survival. Because, yeah. Where's another question? Yes.
So question for the biochemists who are here. The model suggests that when there are a lot of cancer cells, it's easier for the T cells to find them and kill them, but once there are only a few left, because there are a bunch of inert particles floating around, it's harder to find and kill the cells. Is that what we call remission and then the cancer coming back? Like, is that an effective model of what actually happens in a cell or in the body?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we do think like from our like simulations, because we do them, like on larger scale with like thousands of cells, and it does seem like, if the tumor is, like if the cells are more spread out in the tumor, once there are just like a smaller number of cells, it definitely is harder for the T cells to find a cancer cell to kill. So that is something that we observe in the model.
Just a
Great,
variation
yes.
on that, because I was thinking the same thing. Can you get, the T cells were inert and didn't move, and then it got too hard to find. Is there a way for the scientists to get rid of those so that it opens up the space to grab all more of, the cancer
That's a
cells
proposal.
remaining are more open in an open field to be killed?
Yeah, so you mean like the dead cells after they've been killed? Yeah, so they would kind of like hang around for a little bit, but then they would eventually be removed from the tumor once they've been killed.
And there's recent paper that shows that the T cells will oftentimes stick around and like keep working at it. And there's a second,
the dead
there's a
cells.
third kind of cell called a macrophage, which is like means big eater. And they just go around and eat stuff like that. So they're kind of like the cleanup crew.
So I
They
think
eat our own red blood cells.
I think going
when they get
with our
old.
rules, I think we should add that in. I know that we're at a place where we want to go to discussion, but I think if we could show one more model, really taking this idea, we can show kind of how through quick iteration we can adjust the model. It doesn't mean it's right yet, but this is how the process goes. So what I'm going to suggest, one, is that we really make the membrane a little smaller. So the container of that space. Then Rachel, Jake, and I, we can, after we've seen a cell go inert, we can give it a little time, and then we'll pull it out, and it will join the membrane with us. None of that may have any value to science, but it may still allow us to find, all of what Bianette was asking, like, none of these things may be functional to what is actually happening, but it might give them an idea of a direction to go. Yeah?
And part of this is not just to understand how it works, it's to envision new treatments that, what if you could do that? And if we find that that would be dramatically different, then we can start to think, how would I do that?
So again, quick rule changes. We're, Jake, me, and Rachel, we're going to make this a much smaller confined space. The T cells that were on the outside go outside of us. You go in when you're ready, and we'll be ready. If someone goes, we're going to let them, the inert object, move for a while, but then we're going to take hold of them and move them out of the experience. And we'll find out if that causes more kills to happen. Okay? Here we go. Ready? Everybody feel like they got an idea? Good. All right. So spin. And hold.
Man, did anyone catch the drama right at the end?
So, but Eliana, I think you're the only surviving cancer cell. Yeah, so congratulations.
And at the end, you probably couldn't see, you were chasing her down. You were
Right.
so close.
So again, whether we found anything specific in terms of actual science today, what you're witnessing is how this iterative model can happen very quickly and maybe get to some places where we find information that they would then take actually and build into a computer model that would then grow. And we actually have examples of where that exact thing has happened from a body storm into a computer model into something that appears in a scientific journal. So again, we're not saying this replaces computer programming. Of course it doesn't. But it does give benefits, which it doesn't cost tens of thousands of dollars to do this. It can happen quickly. It's fun. You're actually building community. You have the possibility of bringing patients, advocates, and practitioners into this to experience this learning in terms of what do researchers think was going on in your body. That could be a very empowering thing for someone. But now we should turn it over to our discussion space. Yeah, so I'll throw it over to Michael.
Sure. First, I want to. There's an observation from the crowd that says Eliana seemed to be moving backward more than the other cancer cells. So interesting. But, okay, now I'm going to have to pronounce different types of cancer cell names. Why do you think body storming is so important for fast-moving glioblastomas versus the other forms of cancers or other diseases?
For fast moving tumor or
Yes, fast moving. Yeah.
So Riley's been modeling 2 different subtypes of glioblastoma, and one of them is a fast moving, the other one's slower moving. Maybe you want to just talk about what you think are the differences between those two.
Before you do that, why don't you explain what glioblastoma is? Because maybe not everybody in the audience knows that of this particularly deadly cancer.
yeah, so it's a very aggressive type of brain tumor, and one of the big reasons why it's so aggressive is it's very highly migratory. So the cells move really fast, and that means they move really quickly into the surrounding brain outside of the tumor. So that's part of why it's so.
They're all like Ileana. They're moving really fast.
I think something to tie it into how body storming might happen. David explained this one time to me that no, we're not proving whether our research is right, but if you think that there's 3 pathways your research can take, or 3 doorways you could go through, what a body storm might help us find out is go through door 1. When he told me that to me, I said, is that really that valuable? He said, well, if we've gone through doors 3, 2 before we get to 1, we've spent immense amount of resources. So if we have a model that gives us actually clear directionality towards where to go, we're increasing our efficiency and also saving resources. So it's not an insubstantial get when you think about scarce resources.
So I'm gonna ask a couple more questions in the audience. We still have the microphone, so if you have questions, get ready to raise your hand. Also, you can go to slido.com and put in questions. We've talked a lot so far about the benefits to the scientists or the benefits to science. Can you talk, and I'd love to hear the movers talk more about too, is like, what's in it for you as an artist to spend time on this? Like,
I'm actually going to throw that to any of the movers who want to come forward and take David's mic and just answer that. We actually have some people who are both artists and scientists in their own right in this group. So anybody want to speak at all? Caitlin? No? Next time? Yeah. It's okay.
I don't have anything to say in this moment.
Right. I guess I will talk to that a little bit. So where's the art? One of the things you might see is like, was this a dance today? I don't know. I actually watching it on the screen, I thought it was quite beautiful. But it's not necessarily what a person comes to expect when they go to see quote unquote a dance concert. At a certain level, that's not our goal. Our goal is to actually create this model. But how do we use this for science? Often things happen inside of this. Actually, the beautiful questions about what was happening at the beginning of the demonstration, what we'll do is we'll see something. The impact work that Chang and I were doing has led to a quartet of ours called HIT that's had a very kind of powerful effect on audiences who enjoy Black Label movement. We're actually going to be using that impact technique to develop a new commission for the American Dance Festival in June 2024, where we're going to have 8 to 10 of our bodies in a 24 by 24 foot box filled with 10 inches of dirt, where we're going to be plowing through that dirt and then also using that impact technique. So we're not then trying to be cells, but we're actually taking information that we've gained from this experience and putting it into a dance to often very powerful effect. Also, choreographically, I have also started creating improvisatory scores inside of my pieces where I'll say this to 5 dancers, watch someone's spine and just react to that. And the other ones have choreography, but the things that are happening on the outside are always spontaneous. So we're seeing this kind of feedback loop between body storms and the science.
So one thing that really strikes me about this practice is it's creative, it's innovative, but it's also incredibly open to contributions from both the scientists and the movers. And I have to say, like, I've been fortunate to work with some very creative and open scientists, but I also know that that's not necessarily the norm, and someone who has spent years and years becoming an expert on the topic is super stoked to hear a lot of feedback from, dare I say, someone who doesn't even have a PhD, let alone just a member of the public. So how did you arrive at this? Like, how did you work out the rules for like how, and were there any bumps in the road on that process?
Of the collaboration?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Institute for Advanced Study kind of helped catalyze it, and again, Ann Waltner kind of, I think, saw a connection. And what I liked about what Carl was doing at that time, which is this piece called Wreck, which is about the sinking of a ship on Lake Superior and those last moments of life for the individuals on the ship. That kind of catastrophic moment, very physical too. And I was thinking about cells and their catastrophes and how important they are. And I thought this could be a good opportunity. So there's just that. And from there, it was just kind of like, it evolved in the way we said. Tried to do a performance, never happened. Evolved into research and art making collaboratively back and forth. And we've just developed practices like not talking too long.
Yeah. And the work has taken us across the country and the world. We've brought Bodystorming in residencies with David to the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, as well as the National Center for Biological Sciences in Bangalore, India, and other locations. And so if you have research, whether you're a social scientist or a medical or biological science or earth sciences, if there is movement and space and objects, astrophysics, it is available to a Bodystorm. So I mean, it isn't so much just about cell biology. That's the place where we started. But we've done this with currents, fluidic scientists, optics. So we've actually wondered about, could this be a practice where we talk about neighborhood flow and civic planning, right? And what does that mean when you have different blockages? You think about what was the effect of the Kmart that's on, I believe it's Nicollet and Lake. That Kmart was built in order to stop flow between neighborhoods in Minneapolis. What would happen if we posit that building going away and that thoroughfare opening up again? There's possibilities that might be a valuable place for discussion between neighborhoods.
So one observation I had the first time that I was doing the T-cell simulation during the practice thing is that I was being the cancer cell, and then I was killed by the T-cell, and I had this experience of being sad that I died. I had this reaction like, I don't want to die. and I think like that's interesting, first of all, but also I was like, I wonder, like I said, we have cancer survivors in the audience. Has anyone ever said like, I don't know, guys, this is it doesn't have to be facetious, but it's a little something about something that's deadly serious. And has that come up before? Or?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I was sensing that too. It's like, I was like, yeah, we had some survivors.
I
like,
did it.
Wait a minute.
That's a cancer
good.
cell.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I find personally when I'm in this moment, I get detached from the disease and it's really serious and human cost. Even though I have, like for everyone here, we've got stories we can tell.
Right.
And it hurts. But in this moment, I don't experience that. I haven't. The emotional moment I experienced, though, for me, was when I was a molecule called tubulin, and they stack up to form microtubules, which are highways, and then other molecules can move along them. I had studied this for years, and with Carl, I was a tubulin, something I just imagined, we're sure exists, but nobody's seen it, and I was one, and that just was like a breakdown moment for me. I felt emotion in experiencing being the thing that I had been studying for years.
Literally, he dropped to his knees in the middle of a Bodystorm, and tears were coming out of his eyes. And we all thought something really bad had happened. And literally, if for those of you who remember that little movie called Jurassic Park, there's that moment where Sam Neill sees the dinosaurs for the first time and drops to his knees because you're seeing something you've always theorized in actual practice. I do think one of the reasons why we're interested in bringing advocates and patients and practitioners into this dialogue is that emotional content is important, and we don't want to hide from that. That's one of the, like, we actually talk a lot about these are all truncated body storms. Like, how are you feeling? What's going on? I'm feeling like I'm trying to avoid dying. That's actually important information. A lot of people talk about free will. Are people able to really turn off their minds and just do what they're being told? And there's a big, deep discussion that we've been having about if free will really matters in these models. Because if you take them up high enough and look down at them, they actually look like what's happening inside of the cell. So even if you think about Manhattan and going up a mile and looking down at all the people furiously doing what they think they want to be doing, does it really look like they're doing anything other than circulating through a cell? And so there's all kinds of interesting questions on that that can come into this and be a part of the dialogue.
So we have a question on Slido. What is the difference between in vitro and in vivo in your work, and what can we learn from something being one or the other? And you might have to explain that real quick.
Okay, so in vitro experiments are like probably what you all think of when you think of, like, I don't know, science experiments like in a petri dish or something like that. We've got more sophisticated models than that too, but in general it's like on like a flatter surface, like in the lab looking at cells. And then in vivo, like so in our lab we do mouse studies to like study glioblastoma progression. So those are kind of the two differences between those. But we try to kind of get, like there's advantages to each of them, I guess. So in trying to get like a robust like study of doing all different types of experiments like that, including computational studies as well.
Yeah,
You all can
the
sit
mouse,
down if you want.
the in vivo takes more time, it costs more money, and it involves animal suffering, which we'd rather not have.
I just want to say to the movers, if you all want to sit down, you're welcome to sit down, all right?
But the in vitro is not as realistic. It's further removed from what's really happening.
Yeah, question in the audience.
Yeah, I'm a therapist, and I have some patients who are fighting cancer. And I'm just wondering, I could see it like in some of these cancer survivor groups, support groups. This could be I think it has therapeutic value for the people who have cancer to maybe think about their cancer in a kind of a different way. Just wondering if that's been tried.
It's amazing that you asked that question, because literally this weekend I'm working with 7 staffers and doctors from Hennepin Medical Center, Hennepin County Medical Center, to develop a presentation on the benefits of GMV, general medical visits, which are basically, they're talking about how they bring a group of patients together to meet with providers and other staff members to talk about different aspects of what could be part of their treatment, rather than going into a room and having one doctor have this conversation with you. They might have a yoga practitioner, they might have an aromatherapist in the room, as well as doctor providers, and having this discussion, and then letting the patients actually ask questions and talk about what they're experiencing inside of a group, where it's not just a group therapy moment, it's a moment where the whole community's coming together to talk about different layers of healing. And so we're creating a presentation to just that, and that's very much something we would love to see with Bodystorming.
And we did do one body storm in conjunction with the Minnesota Neuro-Oncology Symposium, which I helped organize. And in that case, we had not only scientists and movers, we had clinicians who were surgeons and oncologists. We had patients, actually, and we had their caregivers, too, their family members and friends. So what I think is a potential for this, and it's really interesting you say that, because I don't want to be presumptuous about what would be beneficial for your clients or not, but it's really encouraging and interesting to hear that, is that what I sense when they're in this space, we can break down barriers. When someone uses a jargon word like macrophage, like, tell me what it does. How does it move?
All I think about is Star Trek.
Out. And so I think it kind of it allows everyone to have a voice in this space, and we could really center actually patients if they were open and interested in that. I think that would be really interesting if they were up for it.
Yes, up there.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I have an experience with a family member who had has had a very slow-moving glioma. And it was supposed to have all been surgically removed. We recently found out that it hasn't, but it's very slow-moving. So I found this as a very good therapeutic, even analogy, because the oncologists and the doctors that I'm dealing with, or we've been dealing with, are very scientific. I happen to be a little bit too, but the person who has this is also very, very split between, it's funny you said marine biology, but his science side and his theatrical side. So I'm watching this thinking I have a different model to use in my experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story from your life. And I think we would want, I think that goes back into the question of the art. You know, we want to not let this just be about science. We want to let those experiences live and inform. And I just think about a patient who is wrestling with, you know, all I've been getting is technical information, but suddenly they're in a space with artists, with, you know, practitioners, with providers, with administrators, with scientists, and they're actually hearing, we don't know exactly what's going on in you, but here are some of our ideas. But suddenly, if that patient could be outside of the body storm, or they could even go inside of the body storm if their bodies were up to it, and they could be in dialogue with the researcher. Now, that's not going to be perfect for everybody, but for somebody who is just like, that might be unbelievably empowering, where you're kind of taking away the kind of the monolithic certainty that science is sometimes put forward as, and suddenly you're in the mix and in the process of learning about what's going on in your body. And again, I don't think that's for everybody, but it could have incredible value in certain contexts.
Got time for one more short question. I got one in here. So I mean, I have a number of questions sort of just asking is like, okay, well, Riley and David, you've been doing this for a while now. So okay, so what's changed in your model as a result of this? Are there any examples?
It's hard to think of an exact one you can probably think of one for you, but it definitely, like, I feel like every time after we do this, we're always like walking back to the lab like, oh, we didn't consider that, like we should add this rule into the model. So like it definitely, like every time I feel like I learn something new or consider like some new rule that I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, for me it would be like today was the macrophage, the big eater that comes in and pulls out, gets rid of those dead bodies. Like that could actually play a role in making helping the T cells work better.
And the model, the body storm you saw today literally was made 2 weeks ago for the first time. So you just saw the 5th and 6th iterations of it. You know, we would want to go through these many, many times. And so it again is that trying to create that platform that generates that kind of curiosity, new ideas, new directions. And, you know, I know we all want to think that science is 1 + 1 = 2 and everything goes in a orderly fashion. But as David has said to me, like that's what you see in journals, that's what you see in a lot of how science is communicated. But a lot of it is, I watched the documentary on Stephen Hawking's black hole theories just recently, and when I listened to those scientists, I was like, that's just for artists. They're saying, what do you think if there's a sphere and they were just painting pictures and coming up with beautiful creative images that then they were finding like, oh wait, no, that's apt. And so it's not as linear as people like to think, just like making artistic creations. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Yeah, Kristen.
Yes, I'll echo those thanks.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, typically we'll all thank our participants, and usually it's just the people who are here on stage. But for this particular process, I think it really includes everybody in the room and everybody in the online space. So give yourselves a round of applause, and thank you for participating. I think that we really ended up in a very interesting visual and physical and mental space and a place of possibility. And so I appreciate what you've brought for all of us today. Thank you, everybody in the audience and everybody online for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.